So good afternoon, everybody. This is Gary Turner. We're going to be spending the next few minutes doing one of my regular partner update webcasts. Apologies if you attempted to join us yesterday. We had some technical hiccups, not helped by the sheer hundreds of people that were trying to get on. So we will be recording this session if you have colleagues that would have otherwise made it yesterday but couldn't make it today. And some information and details about where to find that recording will be made available after the webcast is finished. So I have a whole range of things to cover off today. I'm going to give a general update just on where we are, what's happening in the industry, and then going to be devoting quite a big chunk of time to the product roadmap and some deeper insights into some of the things that you can expect to see coming down the line in the next 3 months as we head up into the autumn and then winter for 2015. It's I guess important to note that this week is actually Global Bookkeeping Week. So if we have, I know we have quite a number of bookkeepers who will be tuning in. So we're all raising a cup of tea or whatever it is we're doing to celebrate the role that bookkeepers play in the community. I know that we have many hundreds of bookkeepers that work working with Xero, and it's great to see the role that bookkeepers play being recognized in this way. So congratulations if you're a bookkeeper. We're all thinking about you this week. A couple of the interesting things that we've seen since my last webcast back in June was a little bit of research that came out from IDC Research that actually did some analysis on the global cloud software space. And quite remarkably, as far as we're concerned, because we often don't realize just how big we're getting in scale because we're very focused on a quarter-to-quarter basis as a business. But we were very pleased and honored to be called out by IDC Research as not only the fastest accounting software vendor in the cloud space globally, but also the fastest growing payroll software vendor with 80% and almost 75% year-on-year growth. And our business as it scales is just continuing to set these new records. Back in July, we announced at our annual meeting that we'd surpassed 500,000 customers globally on Xero, 540,000. And it doesn't seem that long ago, in fact, that we were still down in the single figures of thousands. But it's incredible that not only the propensity to move to the cloud is growing every year, growing more strong, but obviously our participation in that and some of the investments we've been making down the years really beginning to bear fruit and building a business of real scale. And it's great to see that recognized by firms like IDC globally. Actually, it seems not that long ago, but it's almost the end of September now. And back in August, for the third year running, we invested quite a bit of effort in putting together some additional training resources and quite a few workshops, more than we would normally do in a month, because obviously August, specifically in the UK and specifically in England, is a huge seasonal vacation holiday month, and it's quite hard to be as productive perhaps in August as you would be during other months. And so for the last 3 years, we've taken the opportunity of that rather downtime period and turned it into a great period for education and learning, and every year again that just gets bigger. And to share some statistics with you, in the month of August, among the UK partner community, just under 1,900 people went through certification just in the month of August alone, which is incredible, and more than twice as many as we saw in 2014. And the feedback that I get regularly from speaking with accounting partners, and in fact, I was in Birmingham last week, and we had caught up with a roundtable lunch of about 15 accounting firms, is that the value that partners perceive through certification and the knowledge and the confidence that it brings to them and their team is helping them in that transition of moving from legacy systems and being that expert when it comes to sitting down and working with clients. And so it's great to see certification valued so highly among the partner community. And again, if we continue our trend of doubling every year, then it's somewhat inconceivable that next year we might even expect to see 3,000 or 4,000 people go through certification in August. But that's certainly the trend. And overall, just under 7,000 people sat through online content that we produced in August. Again, a huge ticking the box for the work that the education team have been investing over the last few months. And it just goes to show that despite the fact that August is a difficult month because of that holiday distraction, it's conversely a great month to invest in education and learning. Back in July, also we rolled out a promotion that's still running and still available, but certainly coming towards the end of its time, where we decided that the next 5,000 customers that came onto the platform could avail themselves of one of two offers or incentives, and by far the most popular one has been converting to Xero for free. So if you're on QuickBooks or Sage, or if you have clients, I should say, on QuickBooks or Sage, then we're subsidizing the cost of the Move My Books data conversion service, which I know has proven to be very popular when we run this promotion in 2014. And so we decided to run that again during the summer. There's no end date to that one, unlike previous promotions, but it is limited to 5,000 because we have a finite amount that we're prepared to subsidize. And I think we're coming up on, certainly in that whole promotion, whether the free conversion to Xero, or if you don't need to convert your data, then you can have 50% off the monthly subscription for 6 months. I think we're coming up on about 3/4 of the way through that particular campaign. So that will still run for, I guess, another few weeks. But if you had clients that hadn't converted or were coming round to their end of year and a good time to move, then if you haven't already grab hold of that promotion, then that's still running for a bit longer. We also announced, given that the Rugby World Cup kicked off this week, we managed to pick up some tickets for both semi-finals and the finals. And obviously, given Xero's roots as a New Zealand company, rugby is very close to the hearts of lots of people in Xero and in the Xero community. And obviously, we have the All Blacks up, as well as the Australian and US teams. And so there's a great intercompany rivalry happening right now in Xero. But nonetheless, we've managed to secure a good bunch of tickets for both the semi-finals and the final. And rather than just gratuitously give those out to people that we think might be interesting to invite to that, we've done it on a basis of a competition whereby if you're adding clients over the course of August and September, for every 10 business edition clients your practice adds, that enters you into a prize draw for tickets to the semi-final. And for the final, the top performing practices in each tier from silver, gold, and platinum will win a ticket to the final. And so if you rank either first or second in your category of silver, gold, or platinum, then you will be invited to join us at the Rugby World Cup and Twickenham, in about a month's time. So we think that's going to be a pretty special day, and we've got some great hospitality lined up. And so again, another way to kind of capture some of the spirit of competition with the Rugby World Cup right now, and given the obviously huge rugby following among our community, and obviously inside Xero, we thought that would be a great offer. And so if you haven't grabbed hold of that one yet, then there's still time to run because we have a few more days left of September. The last update, I announced that we'd secured the date and venue for XeroCon 2016. So that's the 9th and 10th of February. If you haven't already put that in your calendar, then please do so. We'll be actually launching full registrations for that in about a month's time. And I can assure you that we'll have a fantastic array of both guest speakers, but also content and educational content, as well as what was hugely successful last year, which was the add-on partner community presence as well. Last year at XeroCon, we had over 800 people along. I think it was about 800 people over the 2 days, 850 people, I should say, over the 2 days. And it was an outstanding success. And having run XeroCon in London now for 3 years, and I guess the first 2 years we were finding our way and working out what format worked for the UK audience. But last year, or I should say XeroCon in 2015 in February this year, was the one where I felt we really nailed both the content and the overall feel and the educational element to it. And so I'm really looking forward to 2016. And so keep an eye out for information on that in the next month or so. And if you would like to put your name down on the list for first refusal on some of the early bird offers that we'll be doing, where you'll be able to get some tickets at a discounted price, then drop us a note to earlybird@xero.com. I'm going to be focusing for the remainder of this presentation now on products, pretty much. And I'm going to be drilling into a couple of areas that you can expect to see coming out over the course of the next few months. It's interesting. We're in a really quite unprecedented time now where we've come out of an era where you would expect to see an annual update to some desktop software that might bring 5 or 10 new pieces of functionality or improvements to it. And I guess we've all become quite conditioned to expect that that's the way that software innovation should be. But quite clearly, that's not the case when it comes to cloud software, because we don't have that physical limitation of having to ship software to you and for you to then install it and manage it. And because we can deploy new functionality effectively, effortlessly, clearly we're investing time and effort in building it, but actually getting into your hands is really very easy for us to do that. That has created a context where we can invest significant amounts of effort all the year long on building functionality and improving Xero and getting that straight to you as soon as it's done. We're now operating at a cadence of where we're actually shipping well in excess of 500 improvements and releases to Xero in a 12-month rolling period. And that we don't anticipate that is going to slow. And if you actually reflect back over the beginning of 2015, and there were a number of significant iterations and improvements to the product, whether that was side-by-side files or any finding recode or any number of the new significant investments we made in product, as well as a lot of additional things. Obviously, payroll was a significant element. And just this week, yesterday, in fact, we launched a complete overhaul of fixed assets. And a couple of weeks ago, billable expenses, which is, I know, a long-standing feature that a lot of contractors have been waiting for us to deliver. And so you could take a view that we're catching up with where people would have expected us to be, but clearly we're building a product from the beginning, and as well as ticking off all of those horizontal boxes, we're thinking about how we do things differently as well. And so I think we're in a good place when it comes to innovation in the product, and hopefully you've seen the benefit of that. One of the things that we've done in the last couple of months is that we've appointed the first of a new kind of role to help us really shape that roadmap to an even higher degree of resolution. And so it was great to invite Paul Bulpett, who's one of the founders of the WOW Company, or one of our earliest accounting practices in Andover, who have been working with Xero for as long as there has been a Xero, pretty much. And so we've invited Paul to actually spend some of his time as a Xero employee, as our head of accounting. So he's splitting his responsibilities between his role at the WOW Company and actually and being on the payroll here at Xero, helping us really shape that roadmap. And so we're already beginning to see the benefits of that barely a month after Paul's appointment, and really helping advocate on behalf of that partner community, on behalf of the people on this webcast, what is it actually that should be the priority lens that we apply to where we're investing in our product, and how can we benefit from that. We're actually hosting a meeting of what we're calling the XPAC, so Xero Partner Advisory Council, which we actually last met with about 18 months ago, if not longer. And so one of the roles that Paul has, working with our GM of product in the UK and the rest of the UK business, is to really not only take that advocacy from Paul, but actually harness the advocacy from a broad selection of accounting partners and bookkeepers in the UK to help us really define what that roadmap needs to look like for the next couple of years. And so that's a great addition to the team. It's great to have Paul working side by side with us, having worked with him in an accounting practice capacity for the last 8 years. And I hope you'll see the benefit of that rolling forwards in product. We often don't think about product really including things like bank feeds, but there are significant investments that we make in development and lining up integrations with banks. And at XeroCon 2013, one of my commitments was to extend the reach of Xero's direct banking engagement beyond what was then just an HSBC direct feed, and everything else was delivered via Yodlee. And we still think Yodlee is a great partner for Xero and will continue to be an important part of how we build that integration right across the broader selection of banks. But we also identified a number of banks that we wanted to build not just a simple one-way transmission of banking data to Xero, but where we wanted to actually build something much more significant. And that relied on us having a much more intimate and direct relationship with those banks. So I'm pleased to say that barely a couple of years after XeroCon 2013, having made that commitment, we've gone from having HSBC to now having direct relationships, technical relationships with NatWest, Silicon Valley Bank, Santander, RBS, and just this week we've gone live with a direct feed with Metrobank. Metrobank is one of the new banks in the UK banking industry, one of the first banks to have been granted a banking license in about 100 years, about 6 years ago. Predominantly in the south and southeast of England, so a heavy presence in London and around the southeast. And the really cool thing about the feed that we've just pushed live with Metrobank this week is that it's completely fulfilled in application and requires no paperwork or no kind of admin delays. And so we think that that's not only great that we have relationships with pretty much all the main banks in the UK now directly, but we're now beginning to see real innovation in that whole user experience with Metrobank leading the charge there. I had hoped that by the time this webcast would be done, we'd be ready to announce the next direct bank feed, but we're not quite there yet. But if you keep your eyes peeled in the next month or so, I can't say who it is, but it's one of the biggest remaining banks that we don't have direct feed with, so you can probably work out who that is. And it's just fantastic that certainly by the end of this calendar year, we'll pretty much have all the UK's major banks on a direct feed. I know that matters to some partners when it comes down to really building that relationship of trust with clients and being really clear about exactly where the data relationships lie, and the security element of that's really important. And so we think we've now got the broadest range of choice. We've got pretty much every bank on a Yodlee feed, but increasingly a great platform for us to build out banking relationships and have two-way traffic emerging, and much more innovation in that banking relationships in the next couple of years. I mentioned earlier that we just released a complete overhaul of fixed assets. It might not be that visible at first glance, but if you log into Xero this week and have a play about with fixed assets, you'll see quite a significant number of improvements there, not least the ability to bulk upload from a CSV file a whole range of assets rather than having to manually create them. We've also improved how easy it is to categorize and just manage assets with the addition of assets types as a capability, and the overall user experience and maintenance of assets inside Xero has just had a complete rethink effectively. And so if you haven't had a look at fixed assets, please make the time to do that over the next couple of weeks. I'm sure you'll be pretty impressed with what you see. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, we also did a release where we implemented the long-awaited billable expenses capability, where if you're processing a purchase bill from a supplier and you then want to on-charge that to a particular client for whom you're perhaps doing some work, then you could do that in Xero, but it was a bit of a 2 or 3 step process, and we've just made that really simple and straightforward. And although it may seem like a trivial piece of functionality, I know that it applies to a very large number of businesses who will certainly appreciate the benefit of being able to do that in a single workflow. And so we've had some great feedback on billable expenses in Xero this month. A general run through a whole range of things. This isn't by any means a complete list. I've just surfaced what I think are some of the more interesting things, and I'm going to dig into them a bit of detail before we finish up. But what you'll expect to see coming out over the course of October, November, December, it encompasses quite a broad range of improvements and new functionality. Specifically, from a partner perspective, we're going to be investing quite a bit of time in the Green My Xero experience and making it a much more pleasant experience and much more efficient experience. If you're a practice staff member and you're working with a large number of clients, the ability to surface what's happening in those client organizations at a dashboard level. So looking at on payroll or in core accounting, key events or things that are happening in the client organization that you might need to attend to, such as like an RTI filing that's overdue, or some other consequential event that would require your intervention, whereas at the moment you kind of need to log into each organization to then identify that. We're trying to surface a lot of that insight at the dashboard level so that you can at a glance log into your Xero practice subscription viewpoint in Green My Xero and actually see all of that summarized by exception rather than you having to move in one by one. We're also building upon the number of reports and extending both the sophistication and the number of reports in inventory, which I know, having released inventory about 4 or 5 months ago, has gone down really well. But obviously, there's never such a thing as finished, and we're always improving it. And so you'll see some improvements to inventory reports. Quite a big thing is the ability to have a comprehensive search inside Xero. So this is also slated for the next 90 days, where effectively you'll have a search box and you'll be able to then identify transactions or contacts or events or journals or any part of the system pretty much from a search box. And so that would be another way actually of navigating around and finding people. So you could be looking for a client to then either edit their records or go and create a bill or an expense if it's a supplier or a client, and actually getting to them through a search query rather than navigating to them through the contact screen or going into the invoicing screen and then nominating the client you're looking for. So we think that may be quite profound, not just in terms of finding things, but actually just another really cool way of navigating around Xero. By virtue of Xero Touch, which will be, I haven't really covered very much of what we're doing on Xero Touch, but Xero Touch on iOS and Android, you'll see quite a few things added to that over the next couple of months, but specifically on iOS, extending notifications through to the Apple Watch operating system is again something that will already happen today, albeit at a very simplistic notification level, but we'll be looking to make that a bit more interesting. I'm going to cover off Assurance Dashboard in a bit more detail shortly, so I'm going to skip that, and I'm also going to take you through some of the workflows that we're doing around contacts and Gmail integration. But before I move on to that, I'll finish off the rest of this list. So again, in terms of bank feed setup, a lot of feedback about how we can improve that whole process, and so you'll see some improvements in product to help speed that up. As well as a number of other things. We've got the Metro Bank feed coming. Invoice reminders is again a simplistic extension to sending out prompts to customers reminding them that their invoices are overdue, which we think is a pretty interesting extension to the kind of basic functionality that we have inside Xero. And so you'll see that very, very soon as well. And one of the big things from a practice perspective is a lot of work that we've invested over the last couple of years in effectively reconstructing an entirely new reporting engine inside Xero, often called V2 reports. And one of the byproducts of that work is not just a better selection of reports in the core reports library, but a significant improvement to the management reporting capability inside Xero. And so practice reports is a new practice-only or partner-only tool that we'll be shipping progressively over the next 90 days, probably towards the back end of that into December, where you'll see a whole new way of approaching the creation of management reports on behalf of your clients. At the moment, if you're familiar with it, you have to log into the client, you then have to log into management reports, which presumes you're their financial advisor, and then client by client construct a management report pack. So the report center inside Xero is already improving, but the practice reports work will be exclusively for accounting partners, and it's kind of like a power tool for the construction of fantastic and much more flexible in terms of formatting and layout reports for clients. And so there are a whole lot of other things that are beneath the surface of some of these larger chunks. I guess we're spreading our investments in development on what is core and what is moving at a transactional level or a functional level, the overall experience of using Xero, as well as what can we do to kind of move the game on. And so a whole broad selection there. In terms of payroll, we launched payroll back in March. It went live in April. And it actually has been a pretty significant success. We have thousands of businesses now in the UK have started using payroll. Many of them will be moving to payroll from either the Inland HMRC's basic PAYE tools product or some other older system. And so I'm really pleased with the work that the guys are working on to extend what was a pretty strong launch functional footprint back in April, and we're always adding to and refining and building out the functionality of payroll. We also took a decision earlier this month, and we would have announced this, hopefully you've seen it, that we're going to be changing the granularity in terms of pricing, where previously the pricing that we launched payroll at meant that you had to either be on premium at launch, or you the first step off point was either 1 employee or then 10 employees. And a lot of the feedback that we had from customers and partners was if we could create a gap in between there, where perhaps if I had 2 or 3 or up to 5 employees, if there was an intermediate price point. And so we've made some changes, and from October the 19th, we'll be changing the pricing of payroll, and the feedback has been very positive about that. And so hopefully we'll see that really driving adoption as we head up to the end of the financial year even more. So payroll is a big thing for us, and not least because of the looming event that is auto enrollment. And I mean, auto enrollment has been slowly building in its momentum, but the fact of it is there's a huge wall of staging that's about to land in the UK. When you actually depict it graphically, you get a sense of just how big auto enrollment as an activity will be over the next 3 years. And so this chart shows that actually for the last couple of years, there have been something like 10 or 15,000 businesses staging for auto enrollment every quarter, but pretty much from the end of the financial year, so from January through to April, that is just hugely ramping to over 100,000 a quarter, and then over the course of the next couple of years, well over 200,000 businesses staging. So I don't quite think we realise that how big an impact auto enrollment is going to be having. And I know that many of your clients will certainly be coming to you for advice and assistance and kind of selecting a provider and getting it set up and understanding what their obligations as employers will be. But when viewed in this sense, there is a huge auto enrollment mountain that's about to kind of roll into view very, very soon. And so a lot of our investments in payroll are obviously about making that experience as slick and as smooth as possible, whether that's handling the assessment capability inside of payroll, but also the handoff to the pension providers. And so you see some things coming out in Q4, calendar Q4. So in the next 3 months from us around education, helping with that awareness and really hopefully channeling as much of the opportunity that there is for advice and advisory services around payroll and auto enrollment through our accounting partner community. So that's the high level stuff, a lot happening. What I want to do now is talk in a bit more detail about some of the innovations over and above just improving what's already there. Now, we see the journey that we're on through this long-term viewpoint where we certainly haven't finished building Xero, and we'll continue to improve and extend the horizontal capability of accounting and payroll inside Xero. And we are by no means considering ourselves to having finished that job. But we see the opportunity for the next 5 years to really begin to think about what else can we do? How can we make the client, accountant, government, banking relationship that much more interesting and sophisticated? And rather than being thought of as a cloud-based accounting product, which is very much what people perhaps would have seen Xero as 7 or 8 years ago, we actually see both in the ecosystem of accountants and bookkeepers, of which there are over 3,500 in the UK now working with Xero, as well as a large array of add-on solutions. And we see increasingly banks coming onto the platform and other non-bank lending organizations. We're actually creating a platform here that will be multi-purpose in its design. It's not just about invoicing and billing and bank rec, but actually we'll be channeling new value and new services to that small business community. And the small business community have a significant role to play. 99% of all businesses, almost 3/4 of all employment and half of our GDP come from small businesses. And so any investments that we can make to make their lives easier, to channel capital more easily in their direction, or to connect them up with a financial professional who can advise them on how to run their business more expertly, can only be a good thing at a macro level. And so I spoke about this in the sense of some of the business performance dashboards and KPIs that we shipped a couple of months ago, and really beginning to get our head around the big data for small business dimension. But I want to drill into that through another lens today just to share some of our thinking. It's really interesting. Obviously, I'm very invested in working out, well, what's the strategy for our UK business and what's happening, and where should we be taking Xero in the UK to satisfy both accountants, bookkeepers, and our customers. But it's also really interesting for us to share some of the learnings and insights that we have across the world and other countries. And what we are beginning to do, and we'll be rolling this out over the course of the coming months, is beginning to really understand what's happening almost at a macroeconomic level inside our customer base and inside the partner community, and then sharing that and reflecting that back out. And we did some interesting research, and I've just taken one slug from that, which was that we asked customers in New Zealand about their relationship with their accountant and bookkeepers and financial professionals. And 51% of customers who were working, so Xero users, trusted the advice from their accountant, so obviously working with an accountant that's using Xero as well, compared with 27% who said that they actually trusted the advice from their accountant. And we think that that's not just because Xero accountants are more trustworthy. Clearly, that's a huge part of it. You're all very trustworthy. But actually, it's the relationship is much more informed by real data and real insights into the business. And therefore, it's not a trust measurement. It's actually it's a qualitative measurement as much as it is, do I trust my accountant? And that's because we're beginning to surface some real-time data. It's no longer this compliance data dump once or twice a year. The accountant is much more engaged on an ongoing basis with the business owner. And therefore, that relationship is one that ultimately supports a higher value and therefore more trust. And so we think, how can we improve upon that? How can we begin to socialize a new concepts around that? And so the obvious one that we shipped just before the summer was the first iteration of the business performance dashboard. And there's a lot more work that we're going to be doing here in terms of additional data and reporting insights that we can surface, but beginning to enable our customers to become familiar with the concept of running their business not just on a real-time basis and doing things like bank rec and keeping on top of cash, but actually taking a broader and deeper interest into the overall performance of some of their underlying metrics. And because the data's fresher, because it's constantly being worked upon, you can then begin to pull KPIs and other metrics that mean something. We see the relationship between the accountant and the business client in that role really, really critical. And so that's business performance dashboards. But another dimension to that isn't so much about insights to the business, but actually about the overall health and integrity of the data of the business. At XeroCon in Melbourne just about a month and a half ago, we previewed some work, and we'll be launching this capability in the next quarter, that we are under a heading of continuous certification and an assurance dashboard. And what we mean by that, and I'm taking some time to talk about this today because it's easy to misconstrue what it is we're actually trying to do here. Because we can look at an organization using Xero and begin to qualify that the integrity of their financial records is an order of magnitude better or higher than a business that's running on manual records or traditional desktop software that's not quite so up to date, because we can profile that the banking information is coming in from a secure feed. It's hard to tamper with that. Therefore, when we look at the financial cash flow information and the banking information in the business, there's a degree of integrity that brings compared with somebody sitting down and keying in a bank statement or manually kind of munging spreadsheet information around. And so if we can begin this notion of almost certifying that the integrity of the financial data is of a higher standard, then you can begin to position that business not only taking better account of their affairs, keeping on top of their cash flow and their key operational things, but actually when they then go and try and raise capital or get investment into the business, there's a degree of integrity that accrues to that business because they're using a product like Xero, because we're able to surface things like behavior. And so this particular example here is just showing a heat map of the users on this particular system, and we can see how frequently users are coming in and out, where those hot spots are. When somebody leaves the business, we can see that they have no longer been in the system, so they actually have had their access revoked, and just providing a degree of clarity on user behavior and user profile, so that we can then begin to spot anomalies of, well, why is this person logging in intensively at 2 a.m. every other Friday? That doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing anything they shouldn't be, but it's beginning to surface that and to at least shine a light on it. The assurance dashboard, beyond tracking user behavior in a more consistent way, will begin to track behavior on bank accounts. And so who's actually been managing the banking in the business? Has somebody gone in and either created or changed the bank account setup in Xero? When was that? Who did it? What was the last activity there? Again, we're not talking particularly deep kind of audit scrutiny here. It's just beginning to surface the fact that the users on the system are operating in a way that's consistent with what you would expect them to be doing. And then the final area is flagging exceptions, so that where you have, for example, suppliers with the same bank account. So if you have two separate suppliers and they both have the same bank account, flagging that, it may be acceptable, it may be completely legitimate, but it might not be. And it's beginning to just surface these anomalies in a way that you can either go off and satisfy that it's above board, or indeed, in the case of where we have somebody coming in editing account information or banking information, beginning to trap that and surface it. And so the assurance dashboard in this context of continuous certification does not mean that we are moving into the audit business, and it's an entirely other industry of accounting. We're not seeking to kind of extend Xero's scope or reach into auditing. These are actually very simple things for us to do to bring a degree more integrity, not just to the financials, but actually the operation of Xero. And so we're going to socialize that and see what the feedback and see what the reception is to it. It's certainly something that is a brand new concept. You would not expect to see something like this. Clearly, you'd be able to run audit trails and pull up reports in accounting software, but actually surfacing it in a way that is designed to kind of make your job of signing off on the integrity of a client's accounts that bit more resilient. And so we will be launching that in the next 3 months, and obviously very keenly finding out, well, how does that land, and where would the next areas of value around that whole assurance area be inside of Xero. So that's kind of interesting, and slightly more on the innovation side of things rather than some of the more mainstream functionality that we're adding. The other area that I want to dig into before we wrap up today is some of the work we're doing on contacts. So contacts in Xero is where you effectively, as the name would imply, capture the contact information for all of your suppliers and all of your customers, and effectively all contacts within the system. It's probably one of the thinnest areas of functional depth inside of Xero. I mean, so contacts is there almost because it needs to be there. There hasn't been a great deal of innovation or thought applied to how can we make that a much more interactive and much more useful experience. And so the good news is that we're undertaking quite a significant job of work right now, which I'm going to walk you through, that you'll see again in the next 90 days, which is effectively a complete rethinking of contacts inside of Xero. And so the whole point behind that is not so much just to revamp it for the sake of it, but really bringing the relationships with suppliers and with customers outside the organization that exist in other systems and emails and other conduits of communication that you have in your business, and actually bring that much more close together with the accounting information that you store. That doesn't mean that we're building a CRM product, but certainly characteristics of how can we improve that whole client, supplier, customer relationship, and not least by bringing things like email into Xero. And we think that's a pretty interesting space that we're investing effort into now. I'm actually going to flip you into some workflows that we're actually using. So what I'm showing you here is not the finished software, but these are actually the design workflows that we've created, and we'll give you a flavor of what that actually looks like. And so first view, you'll actually see, if you're familiar with contacts in Xero already, you'll see that we've significantly rethought how that whole user experience should look. And so giving snapshot views of just activity and top line statistics on that particular customer or supplier, as well as a summary of activities such as invoices received and payments and so on and so forth. One of the things that we've invested quite a bit of effort in is how do we bring other communications outside of Xero into that. So this is a great view, but it doesn't actually tell you what's actually happening elsewhere in the business in terms of relationships with that customer. And so this workflow that we're looking at here, I'm going to step you through. So let me just do that. Hopefully it will work. And expose a couple of the things that we can create. So there's an email tab here. So if you ignore the finger, this is a finger flow where the design team and the development team have been working out the user experience. And so I'm going to click on the email tab here, which exposes a brand new feature that you'll see in Contacts very soon, which is the ability to connect it with Gmail. So if you're using Gmail for your email in your business, or indeed your clients are, you can now connect dynamically in the background Gmail and the emails contained within Gmail with Xero. And what that workflow will look like is, and you can connect Gmail with a number of services, and this looks just the same. So you connect to Gmail, you would log in with your Gmail credentials. You would then give consent to Xero and Gmail to talk to each other, so effectively viewing and managing your emails and then sucking them through into Xero. And providing you consent to that integration, what will then happen is that your Google account is automatically connected up with your Xero account. And what you'll see is the email tab, and beneath that area is now populated with information in the form of emails related to that particular contact, because clearly we've already got the contact's email address, and we can therefore ascertain that there's a relationship there. We're able to surface the emails from Gmail in that contact view. So first of all, that takes the concept of contacts and contact views in Xero and just supercharges it with not just what's happening in Xero, but what's actually happening in the relationship side of things, and looking at emails, looking at attachments, and really understanding where your relationship with that client currently sits. And we think that's really cool. And that's the beginning of really building out what we think will be a much more significant, capable experience in Contacts. And so the kinds of things that you'll be able to do once you've connected Gmail to Contacts is clearly looking at emails. You'll be able to look at activities. You'll be able to create activities. You can take an email, add it to an invoice, add it to a quote. It could be their sales order, and you actually haven't connected up through files yet, so you can do that from here. You will be able to, I'm going to skip on a few screens here. You'll be able to create notes and create activities against that particular contact. And again, bringing together this centralized hub view of not only what's happening in Xero in terms of financial transactions, summaries, and activity in Xero, but actually beginning to track, well, we called this customer to try and get them to pay us because they hadn't paid us, and I made the phone call, and I'm making a note on their file. And so anybody else coming into Aqua Office Supplies and perhaps they've got £550 overdue, is anybody bothering about that, then the ability to log that activity in Contacts, we're extending that. And obviously with the EAM integration, that's a really natural thing to do. And so we have the ability to create activities and notes inside of Contacts. I'm skipping on a few more screens here. We can do things like add a graphical image. So if you want to have, if you're OCD and you want to have all of your customers' logos and suppliers' logos, then you can do that. And so we're extending the capability and the extent of information that we're recording in Contacts. I'm going to skip on a few more screens. In terms of grouping, so we've changed the way that grouping works, or at least is presented. So previously in Xero, and currently I should say in Xero, you can assign contacts to specific groups, which then enables you to, I want to post an invoice to all of my monthly customers, my monthly billing customers, or my quarterly billing customers. It's a really cool time-saving way. So groups is not a new concept, but the way that we're presenting it is different because we're grouping it together with not only the groups that we create, but also the smart lists. And smart lists is something that we launched in Xero about 9 or 10 months ago. In fact, it might even be a bit longer than that, where you can begin to create custom queries in Xero. So I want to look at all customers in a specific geography or industry sector that have spent more than £500 with me on this kind of product, and then have those unique views. And so it's beginning to really take your contact information and your accounting information and smart lists and actually bring it together into a much more interactive and useful contact hub inside of Xero. And so the layout in terms of groups and bringing smart lists and groups together is also changing. I'm going to skip through a few more of these screens. It's not that interesting showing adding photos. And so you can have logos in there. What we can then do is, so we've just created notionally a new contact for a contact called California Sun Childcare. And what we can then do is attach a smart list to that contact. And so using the smart lists capability, we can do things such as, in this example, tracking cash flow. So the activity that we're going to be creating here for this contact is, we'll pick ABC Furniture, create a new smart list, whack in some conditions. So this customer who has purchased a specific item, in this case a t-shirt, since ever, we could create additional conditions such as the invoice value is more than £100. Run the search, it comes up with a result report of the contacts that fulfill that criteria. We can then create that as a smart list, and again, just begin to take that concept of smart lists and connect that up. If you haven't looked at smart lists, please do so. It's been there for a while, but now with the rebuild that we're doing on contacts, we think actually that will be one of the probably much more used aspects of Xero, bringing emails, bringing smart lists, and really rethinking that whole contacts experience. We think will go down really well. And so that's actually a screen flow of what that will actually look like. And you'll see that launch in the next couple of months, and it'll be great to get your feedback on that. And clearly that's an area that we'll be investing more effort in 2016 to build upon that. And so we're coming up on the 45-minute mark, almost bang on. And so I'm going to bring us to the end of this talk. Hopefully that has been some useful insight, a bit more product depth than on previous talks. There's a lot happening. We're in really good shape as we head into the end of 2015. As I say, there are some things to mark in your calendar, whether that's XeroCon. Don't forget, if you haven't already qualified for the rugby prize draw, you've still got about 10 days to do that. And so there's some really cool things happening, whether that's rugby or XeroCon or Sage conversions. If you have any questions relating to anything that I've showed you today, drop me an email and I'll route you to the right person if I don't have the answer, or speak with your account manager. And thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll speak with you soon.